Section 1. You will hear a man asking for information about health services in the place where he is living. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Can I help you?
Yes, I've just moved to this area with my wife and children, and I'd like to know where we can all register with a doctor at a health centre.
Oh, OK. Well, there's Dr. Green at the Harvey Clinic.
The woman says the doctor at the Harvey Clinic is called Dr. Green, so Green has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Can I help you?
Yes, I've just moved to this area with my wife and children, and I'd like to know where we can all register with a doctor at a health centre.
Oh, OK. Well, there's Dr. Green at the Harvey Clinic. We always recommend her for babies because she's very good with them and she runs a special clinic.
Oh, actually, my youngest child is 5, so that wouldn't be any good for us.
Right.
Is there anywhere else I could try?
Yes, the Eshcol Health Practice is the next one on my list.
How do you spell that?
E-S-H-C-O-L. And it's Dr. Fuller who has space on his list. The clinic only opened a year ago, so the facilities are all very modern.
That sounds good.
And it's particularly good if you're busy during the day because they also do appointments in the evening. They're closed on Saturday, though. The only other place on the list is the health centre on Shore Lane. You can register with Dr. Gormley. That's G-O-R-M-L-E-Y. He's new there, but the centre has a very good reputation.
Oh, yes. I think I know the road. That would be the best one. Thanks. Could you tell me, will all their services be free?
There are usually some small charges that doctors make. Let me see what it says about the Shore Lane Centre. If you need to be vaccinated before any trips abroad, you won't have to pay for this. What else? The Sports Injury Treatment Service operates on a paying basis, as does the Nutritional Therapy Service. Some health centres do offer alternative therapies like homeopathy as part of their pay-to-use service. Shore Lane are hoping to do this soon. I think they may start with acupuncture.
Oh.
And finally, if you need to prove you're healthy or haven't had any serious injuries before a new employer will accept you, you can get a free fitness check-up there. But you'd most likely have to pay for insurance medicals, though.
OK, thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
You might also be interested to know the centre is running a pilot scheme of talks for patients. I've got the list here. Actually, they look very interesting.
What sort of things?
Well, the first one's about giving up smoking. It's next week, the 25th of February at 7 p.m, and that's in room 4. It says the talk will stress the health benefits, particularly for people with asthma or heart disease.
That sounds very interesting.
There's also a talk for families with children. It's on healthy eating and takes place on the 1st of March at 5 o'clock.
Will that be at the health centre?
Actually, it's at the primary school on Shore Lane. I imagine they're inviting the parents of pupils there. It says here, all welcome.
I might go to that if I have time.
There's a couple of other talks. One giving advice about how to avoid injuries while doing exercise. It's on the 9th of March. Oh, it's a late afternoon talk at 4:30, and it'll be in room 6. It also says the talk is suitable for all ages. And finally, there's a talk called Stress Management, which is on the...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a man who owns a holiday home talking on the phone to a woman who is staying there. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Hello?
Hi, it's Laura Carlton here. We've just arrived at the holiday flat, but I can't get the hot water and heating to work.
Oh, right. That's easy. Don't worry. In the upstairs cupboard, you'll find the water heater. You'll see 3 main controls on the left at the bottom of the heater. The first one, the round one on the far left, is the most important one for the heating and hot water. It's the main control switch. Make sure it's in the on position. The switch itself doesn't light up, but the little square below will be black if the switch is off. That's probably what's happened. It's got switched off by mistake. The middle one of these 3 controls, you'll see it's slightly larger than the first one, controls the radiators. If you feel cold while you're there and need the radiators on, this needs to be turned to maximum. The last of the 3 controls, the one on the right, is usually on about a number 4 setting, which for the water in the taps is usually quite hot enough. Below the heating controls in the middle is a small round plastic button. If there isn't enough water in the pipes, sometimes the heater goes out. If this happens, you'll need to press this button to reset the heater. Hold it in for about 5 seconds and the heater should come on again. Then there's a little square indicator under the 3rd knob that's a kind of alarm light. It'll flash if you need to reset the heater.
It sounds complicated.
I'm sure you won't have any problems with it. There should be some more instructions on the side of the heater. Call me back if you can't make it work.
OK.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
While you're on the phone, we haven't managed to find a few things we need, like extra pillows for the beds and some washing powder. Is there any here?
Pillows, yes. If you look in the cupboard, the large white one upstairs, to the left of the bathroom door, there should be 4 or 5 on the top shelf. And if you want to do some washing, there's some powder for that, probably by the back door. There's a kind of shelf there above the sink. In fact, I'm sure there's some there in a large blue box. You need about half a cupful for each wash. Oh, and that reminds me. The spare key to the back door is hanging on a hook on the wall by the sitting room window. Please make sure to put it back when you've used it. The previous guest lost it in the garden and I had to get another one made. And if you have any trouble with the lamps, you'll find some spare bulbs in a large cardboard box. It's on top of the washing machine with all kinds of useful things in it. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention when we last spoke.
Yes?
I've left you a local map, so you'll be able to find your way around easily. It shows the whole area. I put it in the top drawer of the chest under the TV in your bedroom. There's a whole file of local information in there too.
Thanks. What about visiting the town? Can you give us any advice?
Yes. You'll need to take the car. It's too far to walk from the flat, really. You have to pay to leave your car in all the car parks now, I'm afraid. I like the one that's by the station best, and you can walk to the town centre from there in 5 minutes. That's where all the best restaurants are. But if you want a takeaway, the Italian one does really good pasta and pizzas. Call 732281 for that one, or 766119 for the Chinese. They're both good, and they'll both deliver to the flat. As for places to visit, yes, do go and see the Railway Museum. The exhibition is small, but really good. It gets very crowded on Sundays, so I suggest you visit it on a quieter day, later in the week, but not on Thursdays, which is market day. You won't find anywhere to park, and it's also the only day of the week when they're not open. Anything else?
Not for the moment. Thanks.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3.
Section 3. You will hear part of a seminar in which a researcher called Grant Freeman discusses his work on Australian honeybees with a group of students. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Good morning, everyone. In today's seminar, Grant Freeman, a biologist who specialises in identifying insects and who works for the Australian Quarantine Service, has come to talk to us about his current research work. Right, well, over to you, Grant.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure that you know that the Quarantine Service regulates all food brought into Australia. Well, obviously they want to protect Australia from diseases that might come in with imported goods. But they also want to prevent insect pests from being introduced into the country, and that's where I have a part to play. Anyway, my current research involves trying to find a particular type of bee, the Asian honeybee, and finding out whether there are any of them around in various states of Australia. We discovered a few of them in Queensland once and eradicated them. Now we're pretty keen to make sure that there aren't any more getting in, particularly to New South Wales and other states.
What's wrong with Asian honeybees? Are they so different from Australian bees?
Well, in fact, they look almost the same, but they are infested with mites, microscopic creatures which live on them, and which can seriously damage our own homegrown bees, or could even wipe them out.
Well, what would happen if Australian bees died out?
Well, the honey from Australian bees is of excellent quality, much better than the stuff the Asian bees produce. In fact, Australia exports native queen bees to a large number of countries because of this. When the European honeybee was first discovered out in the bush, we found they made really unpleasant honey, and they were also too big to pollinate many of our native flowers here in Australia.
That must have had a devastating effect on the natural flora. Did you lose any species?
No, we managed to get them under control before that happened. But if Asian bees got in, there could be other consequences. We could lose a lot of money because, you might not be aware, but it's estimated that native bees' pollination of flower and vegetable crops is worth $1.2 billion a year. So in a way, they're the farmer's friend. Oh, and another thing is, if you're stung by an Asian honeybee, it can produce an allergic reaction in some people, so they're much more dangerous than native bees.
Before you hear the rest of the seminar, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
How will you know if Asian bees have entered Australia?
We're looking at the diet of the bird called the rainbow bee-eater. The bee-eater doesn't care what it eats as long as they're insects. But the interesting thing about this bird is that we are able to analyse exactly what it eats, and that's really helpful if we're looking for introduced insects.
How come?
Because insects have their skeletons outside their bodies, so the bee-eaters digest the meat from the inside. Then they bring up all the indigestible bits of skeleton, and of course the wings, in a pellet, a small ball of waste material which they cough up.
That sounds a bit unpleasant. So how do you go about it?
In the field, we track down the bee-eaters and find their favourite feeding spots, the places where the birds usually feed. It's here that we can find the pellets. We collect them up and take them back to the laboratory to examine the contents.
How do you do that?
The pellets are really hard, especially if they've been out in the sun for a few days. So, first of all, we treat them by adding water to moisten them and make them softer. Then we pull them apart under the microscope. Everything's all scrunched up, but we're looking for wings, so we just pull them all out and straighten them. Then we identify them to see if we can find any Asian bee wings.
And how many have you found?
So far, our research shows that Asian bees have not entered Australia in any number. It's a good result and much more reliable than trying to find live ones as evidence of introduced insects.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you, Grant, for those insights. I hope that you might inspire some of our students here to conduct some similar experiments.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a student called Shona giving a presentation on her research report. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I've been doing some research into what people in Britain think of doctors, the ones who work in general practice, the first call for medical care, and comparing this with the situation in a couple of other countries. I want to talk about the rationale behind what I decided to do. Now, I had to set up my program of research in 3 different countries, so I approached postgraduates in my field in overseas departments, contacting them by email to organize things for me at their end. I thought I would have trouble recruiting help, but in fact, everyone was very willing, and sometimes their tutors got involved too. I had to give my helpers clear instructions about what kind of sample population I wanted them to use. I decided that people under 18 should be excluded because most of them are students or looking for their first job. And also I decided at this stage just to focus on men who were in employment and set up something for people who didn't have jobs and for employed women later on as a separate investigation. I specifically wanted to do a questionnaire and interviews with a focus group. With the questionnaire, rather than limiting it to one specific point, I wanted to include as much variety as possible. I know questionnaires are a very controlled way to do things, but I thought I could do taped interviews later on to counteract the effects of this. And the focus group may also prove useful in future by targeting subjects I can easily return to, as the participants tend to be more involved. So I'm just collating the results now. At the moment, it looks as if, in the UK, despite the fact that newspapers continually report that people are unhappy with medical care, in fact, it is mainly the 3rd level of care, which takes place in hospitals, that they are worried about. Government reforms have been proposed at all levels, and although their success is not guaranteed, long-term hospital care is in fact probably less of an issue than the media would have us believe. However, I've still got quite a bit of data to look at. Certainly I will need to do more far-reaching research than I had anticipated in order to establish if people want extra medical staff invested in the community, or if they want care to revert to fewer but larger key medical units. The solution may well be something that can be easily implemented by those responsible in local government, with central government support, of course. This first stage has proved very valuable, though. I was surprised by how willing most of the subjects were to get involved in the project. I had expected some unwillingness to answer questions honestly, but I was taken aback and rather concerned that something I thought I'd set up very well didn't necessarily seem that way to everyone in my own department. I thought you might also be interested in some of the problems I encountered in collecting my data. There were odd cases that threw me.
One of the subjects, who I had approached while he was out shopping in town, decided to pull out when it came to the second round. It was a shame, as it was someone who I would like to have interviewed more closely. And one of the first-year students I interviewed wanted reassurance that no names would be traceable from the answers. I was so surprised, because they think nothing of telling you about themselves and their opinions in seminar groups. Then one of the people that I worked with got a bit funny. The questions were quite personal, and one minute he said he'd do it, then the next day he wouldn't. And in the end, he did do it. It's hard not to get angry in that situation, but I tried to keep focused on the overall picture in order to stay calm. The most bizarre case was a telephone interview I did with a teacher at a university in France. He answered all my questions in great detail, but then when I asked how much access he had to dangerous substances, he wouldn't tell me exactly what his work involved. It was a real eye-opener.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.